Hello. So you found out that your kid has been diagnosed with dyslexia, and you're asking yourself, what next? How do I find help? And what kind of help does my child need? Janet and I are here to talk a little bit about one of the gold standards for helping kids with dyslexia, and that is called the Orton-Gillingham method of teaching. The Orton-Gillingham method of teaching was started by Dr. Samuel Orton and his associate Anna Gillingham back in the 1930s. He was researching what was then called word blindness and how to help people of average and above average intelligence who actually struggled with reading and they were baffled. So they studied the English language and came up with a method that's very effective for kids with dyslexia. And it's actually very effective for all kids, whether they have dyslexia or not. So Janet, will you talk a little bit about the Orton-Gillingham method with us?
I would be happy to. So sometimes we'll be asked, well, why does this work when, a lot of times parents have tried many other avenues and things just really don't seem to have been successful. So just to understand a little bit about dyslexia, normally students have just a little different wiring in the brain if they struggle with dyslexic tendencies. And so the phonological processing is usually not extremely accurate. So, and I just want to differentiate. So auditory, we're not saying that there's anything wrong with the child's hearing. It's just when they are processing the sounds, things don't, quite go as they normally would for somebody who, reading may come easily to that person. Also, the visual memory is usually not extremely strong. Which is why sometimes parents will say, well, Joey knows this word in this line, and literally in the very next line, it's like he's never seen the word before. So that is what we are trying to, capitalize on the student's strength. So with the Orton-Gillingham methodology, we are really stressing what we call muscle memory, because the visual memory and the auditory memory probably are not real strengths for the student, but that muscle memory is. And that's why we're incorporating things like tracing so that we can teach the very basic components of the language, but teach them using the modalities that are real strengths for the student, with the tactile and the kinesthetic. So that's why the Orton-Gillingham really works very well.
So in the Orton-Gillingham method, they incorporate what's called a multisensory approach, and that is using a visual input to the brain, an auditory input to the brain, a kinesthetic or tactile input to the brain. And if a child is weak in their visual skills, then perhaps their auditory skills can compensate for that. Or if they're weak in auditory, their kinesthetic or tactile skills can overcome or help strengthen that weakness.
And sometimes too, we're asked, well, my student, my child is getting like the Wilson program in school, so how does Orton-Gillingham differ? So most of the programs out there were developed by people that were Orton-Gillingham trained, like Barbara Wilson with the Wilson program, and
Susan Barton with the Barton program.
Barton, and the language program with the exclamation point. So they are all Orton-Gillingham based programs that have been, packaged for more commercial use in the schools. The other thing I think that's important to understand is there are different levels for the Orton-Gillingham. So even after, the child has, I'm always hesitant to use the word mastered, but, mastered kind of the basics of the language, we're definitely moving into like the prefixes and the suffixes and the Latin roots and the Greek combining forms. So it really goes beyond just, word recognition and improving the fluency, but then we're also, you can get to like the deeper levels of the language and really work on the meaning and the vocabulary as well, and kind of getting everything to tie together for the big picture.
The other thing I like about the Orton-Gillingham method and makes it effective is that it teaches the kids to mastery. As you mentioned, we want them to learn what's called automaticity, whereas they see the symbol for the letter D, they automatically come out with the D sound, or their hand will automatically trace or write the D letter or grapheme, which is the picture or symbol of the D sound.
And, maybe just in closing, Orton-Gillingham, you're really identifying an individual student's, strengths and weaknesses and really trying to fill in those gaps. Whereas, often in school, we just don't have the luxury of, really focusing on, B and D, for instance, and helping a child that has those reversals, because it's like, well, we got to move on. We got to move on to all the sounds of long A or whatever, or all the spellings of long A. But the beauty of Orton-Gillingham is it is very, prescriptive and diagnostic, and it's primarily built on lots and lots of review as we, slowly move the students through the program.
Okay. It's explicit instruction, it's structured, it's sequential, so it will teach the lower, easiest levels of the English language or any language first, and then get more and more complex as you go on.